on up. I'm going to have you introduce yourselves because I haven't met you, but these are all students of Martine, Dr. Martine Ceberio and Dr. Alex Mayer. But I'll let you all introduce yourselves. And do we have there? PowerPoint. Oh, you want to do it through USB? Yeah. Not these? Not these? Like this one? No.
Sure. Well, I'm Alex Mayer. I'm the principal investigator of the project that the students are going to tell you about today, and the title of our project will be up in just a second here. What we're studying is what we call hybrid floating photovoltaic hydropower generation. And I'll turn it over to the students, but just real quick, I want to give a shout out to the funding source for this work, which is the Department of Energy. And also say that this is a interdisciplinary collaboration between civil engineering and computer science. And the title of the talk is Simulating and Predicting Reservoir Water Release Decisions, a Societal Challenge. And next slide. And so our team, again, I'm Dr. Alex Mayer from Civil Engineering at UTEP. And Dr. Martine Ceberio from Computer Science, who can't be with us today. She's got an illness in the family, is a co-PI. And then I'll let the students introduce themselves, and then I'll get out of your way.
Hi everyone, my name is Betül Aslantaş and I'm a PhD student in civil engineering, working with the Professor Meyer for this project.
Hi everyone, I'm Arin Rahman. I'm a PhD student in the computer science department.
Hi everyone, my name is Crisel Marin and I'm a PhD student from the Civil Engineering Department.
Hi everyone, my name is Lisa Vega and I'm currently a master's student in the Computer Science Department.
So the context of our work, the problems we're trying to solve is first, due to population and urbanization increase, there's been a decline in the land area for photovoltaic cells placement. And number two, due to overheating, photovoltaic cells can cause malfunctions, which requires a cooling effect for them to function properly. And number three, the climate change will increase the evaporation rate for the reservoir. So we need, so there will be a decrease in the water availability for hydropower generation. And number four, the effects of climate change are still unknown, so we need to keep an eye for the observe for resilience of the reservoirs. The solutions this project proposed include adding floating photovoltaics in the surface of water reservoirs. This will help save land areas and boost the energy efficiency with the water cooling effect. And we will have different scenarios for climate change to be analyzed for the energy hybrid systems. This is the simulation optimization scheme for the model. We have objective functions, decision variables, and constraint as the main parameters for the model with multiple climate scenarios. I will be talking on speaking on the reservoir parameters and reservoir demand profile. So our study areas include Elephant Butte Reservoir located in New Mexico, and Amistad Reservoir located in the US-Mexico border between Texas and Coahuila. Right now we're focusing on Amistad. And this is the diagram for the water balance for Amistad. So we're taking three main inflows into consideration, which are the Rio Grande, also known as Rio Bravo, Pecos River, and Devils River. Other inflows also include the local watershed runoff, precipitation, and the spring flow. For the outflows, we have evaporation, underflow, and the main one will be the releases, which are driven by municipal, industrial, and irrigation uses, and also the hydropower plant generation. And for our model, also floating photovoltaic plant. So this is how the water balance and the energy production relate. For hydropower production, it is affected by the water demand downstream. So we need to have optimal releases to meet the water demand for normal uses like irrigation and municipal, but also for the hydroelectric power plant. And with the photovoltaic production, the storage directly affects the surface area. So any change in storage, any change in the surface area will help determine the best number for zonal panels for the model. These all These are all based on historical data and records, and later we will have a climate change and demand projections using machine learning. And this will help optimize or maximize the cost benefits of energy production, and also for the photovoltaic production will help offset the hydropower production losses due to climate change in the future. This is the seasonality for Amistad Reservoir. It's the inflows and the outflows of the dam. For inflows, they're higher during the months of July to September, and the outflows are higher during the months of March to May. This is important to keep track as they drive the volume of the reservoir and also the surface area, which are important for the hydroelectric power generation and photovoltaic cells, which my friend Betul will help explain.
Hi everyone, I will talk about the effect of the floating solar panels on the reservoir and also the hydropower generation of the Amstadt Reservoir. So as we can see here, there are like two satellite images. That one of them is the December 2020 and the other one is the April 2024, which is recent. Everybody can hear me? I'm sorry. So when we look at the picture, the December 2020 image, which is on the left hand, has a larger surface area than the April 2024, with the difference of 54 kilometers square, which means actually this reservoir is faceting the water scarcity currently right now. When we look at in terms of the values and the numbers for the historical data from 2017, we can see that actually the decreasing trend, even though there are like some peak values. However, like from 2017, the reservoir has a decreasing trend. The amount of the water in the reservoir is also important for the hydropower generation, because the hydropower generation actually depends on the storage in the reservoir. And we can also see that actually the hydropower generation also has a low values throughout this time. So when it comes to situation, we want to find a solution, and we figure out the floating solar panels. Installing the floating solar panels is going to be an option for the situation, because the floating solar panel is basically putting the normal ground solar panels on the water bodies, either the natural water bodies or human-made water bodies or the reservoirs. Well, the effect of those floating solar panels and the proposal of the putting and installing them is the decreasing the evaporation rate in the reservoir, which will eventually increase the water level, and also having more energy output thanks to help of the water cooling effect. We can see that there is a schematic illustration how the hybrid system works. Actually, it's a reservoir, there's a dam and then gate regulations, and there is a floating solar panels all installed on the water body and all the grid system. And on the right hand actually is that real image, which is already installed, and then they have been using as an energy output, like another renewable energy option. So I would like to talk about the cooling effect, which is really important. As we know that when we think that it's a higher temperature will give us a more energy for the solar panels, but actually it's the other way around. When the temperature exceeds the design operating temperature of the cell, will cause a malfunctioning, which means that actually it will generate lower energy. So for that one, that the system needs a cooling effect. Either it's a passive cooling effect or active cooling effect. putting the floating solar panels, I mean, the solar panels on the water bodies is the passive one. So basically, we will just put on the water bodies and then get the effect of the water temperature has in on the cooling, because the water temperature is lower than the air temperature. When we look at the chart, actually, we can see that the air temperature that collected by the National Renewable Energy Lab, the data, has higher temperature than the water temperature. And afterwards, when we calculate based on the literature review equations for the cell temperature, which is really important for the energy outputs, that the operating cell temperature, we can see that the ground solar panels has higher temperature than the floating solar panels temperature. The green lines, the ground solar panels, and then the red line illustrated for the floating solar panels. So we calculate the water temperature, the solar cells temperature for the ground, and then also for the water bodies. So it turns out that we also need to calculate the energy output so we can show that the energy has like more than the ground solar panels. For that, we need the demand in the area. Well, Amstrad Reservoir has been located in the Valverde County. First, we aim to getting the demand in the Valverde County. And afterwards, we also focus on the around counties that we can gather the data. So when we gather the data, Valverde County has a higher demand, whereas the Kinney and the Kirkwood counties have a lower energy demand. We also gather the hydropower generation, so we can abstract these values, and then we can actually see how much megawatt hour or how much energy that this area that the people need to have it. And after that, again, based on that literature equation, we calculate the energy output. And we can indicate that on the left hand, it's just the comparison with the ground solar panels and the floating solar panels, which is the orange line indicates for the floating solar panels has higher energy output. And the blue line is for the ground solar panels, which is a lower energy output. And on the right hand, actually, I want to compare all the values, the hydropower generation, the energy demand, and also the floating solar panels generation and the ground solar panels generation. So the green line indicates for the floating solar panels generation, which is the higher one. And we can see that dam power generation is actually really low, and it's not even affording the total energy consumption for these three areas. So these areas need another renewable energy to afford the demand. So we also need to know the required area, because it's when we said, oh, we will install all the solar panels on the reservoir, it doesn't mean, oh, we will cover all the reservoir. Based on the demand in the area, the service area, we will be calculated in the amount of the solar panel cells and then also the area. When we follow the literature equations, it's like just 3.12 kilometers square for the whole reservoir. And when we convert to the percentage, it's like 2.93%. And the number of cells is like 500. But throughout this time, of course, we have some challenges. The first one is identifying the constraint, because the dam is a regulated dam, and we need to know how much water we need to release or when we need to release for which purpose, because there's irrigation, there's urban area as well. And the other one is the data collection. Well, the accuracy of the data, identifying the relevant data for the model, and also the consistency of the time series between the data variables is really important. So far, we just present historical and then present results, but we also would like to know, and we have concern about the future as well. So for the future prediction, my colleague Will Aaron will lead the presentation.
Thank you so much. So the computational challenges that we are tackling here has to do with hybrid floating photovoltaic hydropower systems, improvement in terms of performance, and specifically when it operates under uncertainty conditions. So the key question here is, well, the system already works. We're not trying to make the system work. However, the key question is, how can we make the system work better, and how can we optimize its performance? So that's where machine learning kicks in. Machine learning is all about learning from past data And we have trained our models, RNNs and LSTMs, using historical data. So they are able to make predictions regarding reservoir inflows, solar radiation, energy demand, and so and so. So there are several opportunities in this system, as you can see, even without solar panels. So for example, if imagine if I'm being able to make predictions about whether there will be a draft or not in advance, which of course my model will help me to do so. So I will essentially have solutions to my problems even before the problems arise, correct? And it's not just about balancing off the numbers, it's more about balancing the real trade-offs. So when I say real trade-offs, what I really mean is, for example, how much water needs to be released for energy generation versus the irrigation, and also the power output, maximizing the power output without destabilizing the grids and so on. So these aspects, to make decisions like these, will require very sophisticated optimization techniques, and that's where we come in. And so we essentially want to build a feedback loop that is able to abide by adaptive learning, so that the model can learn from real-time data, correct? So moving on to the modeling and computational challenges. So the first and foremost problem is really figuring out what the constraints are. So when I say figuring out the constraints, I mean being able to define the problem and being able to, and so we are computer researchers, right? And as computer researchers, it becomes difficult to, define the constraints at one go. So that's where our domain researchers come in and help us. So we're thankful to them. And when it comes to having constraints in a problem, that itself introduces complexity to the system. I believe constraint solving problems are one of the hardest problems to solve in computer science, but it's also a very interesting problem to solve. And second challenge being, so like I mentioned, that we're using historical data to make predictions. And the key question here is how, is the historical data good enough in terms of, operational use? And because we do not, when the historical data, let's say if it is suboptimal, we do not want our models to repeat those mistakes, correct? So that's a major concern that we need to keep in mind when we're trying to fine tune our model, when we're trying to refine our model. And next up, we have ensuring data robustness. So if the historical data is of the best quality, still in real life, there are inconsistencies that we need to take care of when it comes to modeling. And the next concern is, so like, how do we handle these uncertainties, correct? So that's where our feedback loop comes in. We don't want a static model. We want a model which is able to learn from past mistakes. So let's say if I got a incorrect prediction last month, I don't want my model to make use of the same data. So that's where our feedback loop and adaptive learning comes into play. And lastly, before I pass on the mic to my colleague who's going to talk about the model in details, the models we have, it's really about understanding what success really is, right? When is the time to raise a green flag and say that my model has predicted results which are good enough in terms of operation? So being able to solve optimization problems, I think, we don't have all the answers yet, but by the time we have all the answers, I believe it would make more sense. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, yeah, thank you very much for that. So given these known modeling and computational challenges, our approach leverages various different techniques in order to solve this problem. The very first technique that we utilize is time series forecasting. So for those of you that aren't familiar with what time series forecasting is, essentially we'll have a time series, which is essentially just a bunch of dates that have some sort of values, and we try to find a correlation between these values in order to make further predictions. So as we can see here, what we did is we used machine learning models in order to do this. The models that we used were recurrent neural networks, long short-term memory networks, bidirectional RNNs, as well as dense networks. In order to make these predictions. In this case, we found that the LSTM proved to be the best. It also looked like all of them did seem to manage to get the same shape of our data. However, the lowest mean absolute error and mean squared error was the LSTM. Now moving on to our next technique, which is constraint solving techniques. What we do here is we want to make sure that the reservoir health, as well as a lot of conditions, are being met. So what we have is that we have our energy demand that's being pushed into a distribution system. Our distribution system has essentially a panel amount that's also being factored in so that we can distribute our solar panel energy and our hydropower energy. From there, it goes into our hydro and solar power prediction systems. Essentially, that's where the machine learning comes into play, where we predict how much water we're going to release and how much energy output we expect from the system. On the hydro bound system side, we do have a bounding kind of system where we make sure that the reservoir's health isn't going below a certain level or above a certain level because we don't exactly want to flood surrounding cities. And from there, it goes into a notification system. So this is where the feedback loop really comes into play, where if we find that we don't exactly meet these energy demands, we want to redistribute our energy accordingly. If it does end up meeting the demands, therefore, we can actually release the water from the system. Next would be our optimization algorithms. Now, this is really where it begs the question, what exactly should we be optimizing for? We're currently not exactly on that stage yet, so we're still working on those optimization algorithms and fine-tuning our constraints. With this being said, how exactly do we see this impacting our region? First, we'll more accurately meet irrigation needs as well as increase energy creation. And on top of that, building these systems will allow us to have a more dynamic range to be able to simulate these reservoirs in different areas as well as extreme climate conditions. Given this further understanding the problem, we know that we have to meet irrigation needs. We know that our system health is extremely important. Environmental influences play a huge role on these reservoir healths, as well as impose regulatory challenges. So in some cases, these reservoirs are split among different countries. So for example, the Amnistad is between the American and the Mexican border. So there's things of that nature that we have to keep into mind, and as well as power constraints. So with this being said, we'd like to kind of open the floor for all of you guys to see what exactly we're missing. So maybe parameters that we may have forgotten or constraints that we may have forgotten. And with that being said, I'd like to say a huge thank you for your time and also open the floor for any questions.
We have time probably for just one question. Or
Great job, you guys. Good teamwork there. I had a question. You mentioned that one of the key components is maintaining the reservoir health, but I think I have some questions about the ecological health of the reservoir. For instance, it says you're going to cover 3% of the reservoir with these panels. Have you thought about how that might influence the primary production of the reservoir itself? Like how it would affect algal growth or how it would affect fish populations downstream from that, or also the impact of the panels on birds that use reservoirs for sites along their migration paths, because they might be attracted to the panels. And I'm just wondering if you've thought of any of those ecological impacts.
Well, I of course did a literature review about the ecological impact of water quality, and then especially I ran into one of the research happened in the Netherlands. They put like underwater drones, and then they actually figure out that it doesn't affect like as we think. And also there are new solar panels manufactured that actually they are really transparent, and it doesn't really cut it out all the sun from the water body. So of course, I will be still looking for the ecological effect. And personally, I am not an ecologist, but there are papers who really did the research on it, and then I'm really reading it, what's going on and how it's going to affect. And it's a reservoir, it's not a natural lake, because natural lake has more actually the animals than the reservoir. So for the reservoir, I will just focus on the temperature and then also the ecological aspects, but we figure out that the materials that we can use actually can be transparent and also will not affect ecology at all.
Okay, I wouldn't say not at all, but maybe minimal impact.
I will-
Okay,
yeah,
thank you. I guess in the
I'm pretty
interest
sure
of
that the
time.
effect will
Yeah.
decrease.
Yeah.
Since you're from the IBWC, I think.
Well, I had a quick question for you. I know you're looking at Amistad. I'm with IBWC. So that's one of our reservoirs. The thing is, why not use something smaller like American Dam down over here? There's always water in there and it would be something that you could use because the water is usually fluctuates. Either it depends on the season, but most of the time there's water. And so this would be something you could use because all we really see out there is a lot of silt, or else we have a lot of birds and stuff out there. In Amistad, the thing in Amistad, the biggest problem we're having right now is we have too much waterfowl, especially the what are those? Oh, turkey vulture problem we're having that are actually on our gates and stuff that we're trying to alleviate the problem with them. But American Dam down here might be something you might want to look at as a microcosm for something to use for this because there's water always year round in that area.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much.